I'm just messing with you all. What's happening, everybody? Welcome to Old Man Squad, fantasy basketball presented by FanDuel and the FanDuel Sportsbook. I'm Dan Besbris. Follow me on Twitter at Dan Besbris. And if you enjoy what we're doing over here, please, at some point during the program, hit the like button and the subscribe button, and you can be with us all year long. We do not take breaks, and there are now 5+ members of the Old Man Squad doing videos right here on the YouTube channel, many of whom also have their own podcasts feeds, so you should check those out as well. On our show that I recorded just a few hours prior to this one, the royal we, planned on getting through the top 25. That did not happen because I talk too damn much. I got through the top 12, which sort of extended into how I felt about a couple of players just outside the top 12. And then I hit around a 30 to 35 minute marker and thought, you know what? Let's put a pin in this. It's really two shows. I should stop talking because my voice is beat from a weekend of yelling at various things. And we pick up here in this one at player number 13. So on this program, we're basically going to be looking at the new Yahoo second round. The board freshly released on September the 22nd. This is revision 3 for the Yahoo pre-rank tables. And again, we will be looking at round 2. Is it still a mess? You may ask yourselves. Let's find out. We begin with Devin Booker, who's pre-ranked at 13, and in my opinion is probably your safest second-round pick. It's not all that surprising given he is the first second-round pick listed, because last year, Booker's coming off a 33rd place ranking, not all that great. The year before, he was number 16, and he figures to be much closer to that this year with the uptick in usage that sort of goes along with the departure of Kevin Durant and Bradley Beal. I know Jalen Green is in town now. He's obviously not as threatening of a usage guy as Kevin Durant and Beal were. Maybe you could say more than Beal. But Booker, when he had his big early second round year, it wasn't all just because he was taking a bunch of extra shots. In fact, a lot of it was because he shot 49% from the field instead of 46. He was a positive there instead of a small negative. I'm not really all that worried about that. If the field goal percent fluctuates a little bit, so be it. He's probably going to be a guy who has to get you 7+ assists now. Yes, the turnovers will likely go with it, but if you're getting 35, 36 minutes of Booker and 20 shots a ball game, you're talking about a guy that really could legitimately average 29 points per game, 2.5 threes, over 4 boards, over 7 assists, a steal, something like 0.3, 0.4 blocks on, we don't really know, field goal percent, and free throw that is typically approaching 90. He's a powerhouse in that category. So, and there's the other part of this, which is there's always the kind of roto versus head-to-head discussion hanging over things. Booker is a better roto player than head-to-head because he won't have a specific weakness to his game. Blocks are not great, but he's a guard, so you don't really care. Field goal percent is better a lot of the time than most guards. This last year, it was kind of on par with a lot of them. I guess you could claim, and it's weird to say this, but the 2.23 pointers from a couple years ago and a little more than that this past year, that's kind of a weakness for a high volume guard that scores a lot. But that's nitpicking. Head to head, you might make the argument to start your second round with James Harden, who, an 8-cat, he beats the pants off of Booker this past year. 9-cat, he beat him 2, but it was a little bit of a tighter race. Harden was number 6 in 8-cat this past year. Roto, though, I think you've got a dilemma on your hands because Harden's going to be weak in field goal percent. He's going to have very high turnovers. If you really are trying to push sort of all the categories across the finish line, maybe it makes more sense to take the guy that you can build around in a lot of different categories, or maybe it makes sense to take both of those guys, depending on, if you have pick 12 and pick 13. If you're in a 12-teamer, you would. That's the way the math works. Maybe that's your pathway there. Although, again, if you want my thoughts on LeBron James, who just got pushed up to number 12 on the latest board, you got to go back and watch the last episode that I put out personally on the top 12. After Devin Booker is Paolo Banchero at number 14. We're not going to go in too deep on this one because you guys have heard my take on Paolo. Whether you agree or disagree, you're going to hear a brief version of it again. He was number 131 in 9 category leagues last year. That is not remotely close to fantasy value. He was number 91 in 8 category leagues. Okay, now at least he's inside the top 100. He's a bad foul shooter, so that if you punted foul shooting in an 8-cat league, that got him to number 55. He was also kind of bad at field goal percent. So, all right, especially as a power forward, that number's not very good. That moves him up to number 37. What else was Paolo kind of bad at? I guess he wasn't a very good steals guy at 0.8. That moves him up to number 21. Okay, I guess we have our team build now. It's points, threes, rebounds, assists, and blocks. What? Yeah, I get it. It doesn't make any sense. And that is why, in category leagues in particular, but I would argue even points leagues, this is just too damn early on Paolo Banchero. And this is not a knock on Paolo, who I think is going to have a really good season, and I think the Orlando Magic could have a really good season. Their FanDuel season win total is 50.5. 50.5. That feels fairly attainable in kind of a flimsier Eastern Conference. If they got Desmond Bane in there going healthy, if Franz stays healthy, if Suggs can stay healthy, they got a lot of really good young ball players. So it's not a knock on what those guys can do. It's really more about what does that translate to in 9-cat fantasy basketball. And with Paolo, he's going to score a lot. Can't take that away from him. I wouldn't even try. His rebounds are decent. The assists are okay. But that's kind of the end of it. Everybody that comments on these shows is like, there's no way that Paolo's the 131st best player in fantasy basketball. No, he's not. But that's not how 9-cat works. 9-cat is an aggregation of 9 categories, some of them being tied together, some of them being tied to volume, some of them being tied to efficiency, proximity to the basket, whatever, all these different things. It all gets rolled into one delicious 9-category burrito. And for Paolo, his burrito has 3 ingredients. And barely that. Yucky, I say. That brings us now to James Harden, who moved back down a slot. By the way, and we should probably mention where guys are moving. Booker moved down from 12 to 13, which is where he started. Paolo has gone down 1 slot in each Yahoo board readjustment. He was 12, then 13, now 14. James was 15. He went up to 14 when Tyrese Maxey slid down. And now, because LeBron slid up so far, Harden is back down to 15. Where I like him quite a bit, especially for head-to-head leagues. I think this is, I don't want to say the value play of the early second round because it's weird. Like, we're talking about a guy who was number 15 in 9-cat last year. And in 8-cat was where he got a really big bump. Field goal percent punt also gave him a very large bump. There were a few different ways that James Harden could have had a bunch more value. Head-to-head, those ways are ways you can just build into your team. Roto, by the way, even without a punt, James Harden shot the ball better down the stretch, and he was a first-rounder without any team tweaking going on. Honestly, even more than down the stretch. It's like the last 25 games, he was top 10. Last 15 games was when he really got hot, and he was top 5. So I like James Harden a lot early in the second round. I think he's a pretty easy head-to-head player to build around. You're not going to get a truckload of scoring. We'll see if anything comes of this Kawhi Leonard stuff. But odds are the 22 to 23 points per game last year was probably around what you could expect. He's a good rebounding guard. He hits a bunch of threes. Assists are always high. Steals are pretty good. And you know what you're getting. You're going to get a bad field goal percent. You're going to get extraordinarily high turnovers. He's a predictable fantasy asset who played 79 games last year. And I don't know that we can necessarily expect that again. But I also wouldn't say it has to be the opposite. He doesn't jump anymore. He still looks for contact, but, not getting in the air. Nor is the next man on the list at number 16, but he's built a little bit of a different way, and that's Alperen Sengun at 16, who started at 23, jumped up to 16, and that's where he's now still chilling. And you guys know I have my beef with Sengun being in the second round. I just think again, we're creating too many things that need to happen for a player to get where we want them to be. Now, there was the big Freddie VanVleet news from earlier today, as of before recording the show. He is out probably for the entire season with a torn ACL. I would pretty much guarantee it's the entire season, but, you know, it's September, so there's no point in guaranteeing it, which sucks because VanVleet was one of the guys that I was very much targeting in that 80s and 90s range, and now he's completely off the board. It totally changes what I'm doing in the sort of the late middle rounds, where for a while there it looked like I could get a cheap point guard, and now I don't know that we can anymore. So let's say that helps Sengun a little bit. Last year in an 8-cat build with punt free throw, he was number 37, which I've said on this podcast I thought was about as high as he could go. Now, without VanVleet, I think there's a chance he could go a little bit higher than that. But again, it kind of has to be this particular build, which is free throws. You got to be punting free throws, because if you're not, he's not going to get anywhere near top 20. You don't have to punt turnovers, but he's going to be probably a higher than average turnover center at the very least. And it did help him to punt them to make it 8-cat instead of 9. Not my cup of tea. I would certainly take Sengun over Paolo, at least of the guys that I don't think really belong in our second round discussion so far. And Albi's probably going to go in the second round because he's going to score 19 points a game with a bunch of rebounds and a bunch of assists and some steals. And people are going to fall, rightfully to some degree, but also regrettably in others, fall in love with the handful of counting stats where Sengun is solid. But for a center, the field goal percent was not very good. Free throw percent was quite bad. Turnovers were pretty high, especially for a center. He doesn't space the floor, or didn't. Maybe we should say didn't space the floor. I can't tell you whether or not that's going to hold this coming year. But Sengun is not a guy I'm drafting in the second round. He's a guy I think should be going in the late third, early fourth in specific team builds. But he's going to go earlier than that. And so that sort of makes the conversation moot to some degree. Tyrese Maxey is the next name on the list. I like him at 17. It's where he was before. So I don't want to spend a ton of time on Maxey because I think he's a decent value at this spot. I don't think he's going to blow you away. He's a lower turnover early round guy, so that makes him slightly less enticing for some, not like an extraordinary degree, but, 9-cat, he was higher than 8-cat. 9-cat, he was number 10 last year. 8-cat, he was number 15, which I think is probably why he's at this spot. I'm a little surprised he isn't up 1 or 2 clicks, maybe ahead of Paolo, ahead of Sengun, because Embiid and Paul George figured to miss the beginning, possibly middle, and possibly end of the upcoming fantasy season. But, maybe they come back part way. Maybe the Sixers do get healthy, at which point Maxey probably does slide back down the board a little bit. But at least right now, I think he's a pretty good mid-second rounder. But he didn't move. He stayed at 17, as Alperen Sengun did at 16. Everybody else that we've talked about in this second round has moved at least one slot, with, again, Booker going down 1, Paolo going down 1, Harden going down 1, LeBron going up 3. And then you have this run, 3 guys in a row that all stayed exactly the same. And the third guy in that run was Jaylen Williams, who I've said on this show before, I'll say it again. I think this is a very, very fair place for Jaylen Williams to get drafted. Fair. He was late second round in 9-cat. He was early third round in 8-cat. You take Kyrie Irving, Tyrese Halliburton, Damian Lillard, Jason Tatum all off the board. Someone like a Jaylen Williams, who was hovering around 24, 25, 26, he bumps up to around number 20. So taking him at 18 is basically the same as taking him at 20. There isn't really much of a difference there. I guess you could argue that maybe he's going like 2 slots too soon based on 2 of the players that I see behind him and the fact that he was ranked 2 slots, or would be, if you remove just the superstars that are out for the entire year, ranked 2 slots behind this pre-rank of 18. But this is totally fine. Don't trouble yourself about it. Don't worry your little punum. Everything is going to be fine. So that allows us to keep moving and keeping up a decent pace on today's show. And now we'll talk about De'Aaron Fox. Fox has moved up one slot each of the first couple of rounds. That brings him to number 19 on the board. And in my opinion, this is way too early on Fox. He was number 41 last year. Yes, he was playing through the busted pinky. But, a lot of the issue with Fox was not about the busted pinky. It was about what his job was going to be in San Antonio. And apologies, yawning mid-podcast. It's fine. I turned the microphone off. No one will know except the people watching the video. Fox was really not impressive after moving to the Spurs. And I don't think the 42.5 field goal percent is going to hold. So the 19 points will go up. But the greater concern for Fox is that his usage with San Antonio was just significantly lower than it was in Sacramento. He was taking 3 fewer shots per game. He was playing 3 less minutes per ball game. So the rebounds were down by 0.7. Assists were up because he was point guarding more and having to score less. So I guess that was something. Steals and blocks stayed exactly the same. Turnovers came down along with the lower usage. But if you're taking a high usage point guard, you kind of want them to be a high usage point guard. So if that gets taken away, and that's not a fair way to assess it. He's still going to have a lot to do, but it's Wemby's team. Sacramento is Fox's team. San Antonio is Wemby's team, and they've got some young guys that are going to be getting a bunch of shots up. I've always been a little bit skeptical of De'Aaron Fox's fantasy value, and there was one year in there where it all kind of came together for him. He shot 47% from the field. He was at 83% at the free throw line, 25, 5, and 6 with good steals. He was hitting 2 3-pointers a game or more. I don't think that Fox is here anymore. That Fox was taking 21 shots a night. This Fox was taking under 17. You'd say, oh, well, sometimes the usage. No, I don't think so. So Fox is a no for me here late in the second round. Much like some of these other players, I just think he's pushed up the board too far. And by the way, the other note on him is he wasn't a bad free throw shooter last year. So there wasn't like this magical way that he pushed himself into fantasy value. 8 Gaddy was number 28. So still not even really where he needed to be to get to value for this coming season. Kevin Durant is one of the big movers of this latest board swapperino. He goes, KD does, from number 31 to number 20. And it needed to happen because at 31, 32 is where he actually opened the second board. He moved up one slot. Now he moves up 11. That's one of the biggest jumpers on the board. And that now makes me a little bit more nervous. So one of the big things about KD is that, and no Freddie VanVleet, so he's going to get usage beyond his wildest dreams, which is saying something for Kevin Durant. I've said it before, I'll say it again. I think KD is a top 8 per game fantasy guy this year. So in the third round, he was the no-brainer to end all no-brainers. He and Steph Curry both in the third round were the no-brainers to end all no-brainers. The issue here at 20 now is the total side. So per game, KD was 11 last year, and he's going to do more. But he missed 20 ball games, so his totals rank was 25. If Kevin Durant can get to 62 games this year, he probably has a totals rank of around 20, if I had to guess. So to that degree, if you think he's only missing 20 games, he probably gets to even this draft slot. And right now, maybe I'm just dealing with the fact that I'm feeling sad over KD not being a third rounder in public drafts next month or something like that. But the other side of it is he's been going in the second round in basically every intermediate to expert level mock draft that I've been a part of, which is all of them in September, because there are really no public Joes drafting a month before the season started. So this is where he was going anyway. Now the pre-rank is going to reflect it, and you'll likely see the ADPs fully reflected as well, especially once you start to see public leagues open up, and it'll kind of settle around where he's at in this one. So that's a shame. Scottie Barnes is at 21, which is a 2-slot drop for Scottie. It's a start. If you can't say anything nice, don't say anything at all. That's not true. Scottie Barnes is a good basketball player, but Scottie Barnes was number 63 last year on bad field goal percent, not great free throw, pretty high turnovers, and then a whole boatload of counting numbers. He was great on that front. Last season, Barnes was at 19, 8, and 6 with 2.4 defensive stats on top of it. The 1.2 3-pointers is indeed a bit on the low side, but he's been a percentages killer over this last year, and maybe you blame some of that on not having any healthy teammates, blame some of that on maybe not entirely healthy himself. Was there an effort situation involved? Guess what? It doesn't matter. Scottie Barnes gets back to that second round area by re-adding the blocked shots he had the year before. And I don't know that those were real. He was at 1.5 blocks. Yes, the field goal percent was better that year. I think free throw was a little bit better also. But it can't just be those two things alone. He has to go from being an adequate shot blocker to being an elite one. And it's just not something that I'm willing to bank on with my second round pick. There are certainly punts that help the situation. Scottie Barnes, an 8-cat last year, was number 46 instead of being in the 60s. If you were an 8-cat and you punted one of his 2 percentages, let's say field goal, that pushed him up to 36. Free throw pushed him up to 33. If you punted them both and turned Barnes into a points league guy, he's number 23. Okay, now you start to see where this rank comes in. But we're not playing points league, and that's not what this show is. So you take your category league team and you walk right on by. Speaking of walking, I sure hope the next guy is able to do it this coming season, and that's LaMelo Ball, who's at number 22. No matter how much bad-mouthing of LaMelo Ball I do on this show, he just won't fall far enough. I think I may have did I put in his number wrong on this? Oh, there he is. No, 22. I got it right on my board. This is what happens when your eyes are buzzing out at the end of the day. LaMelo Ball, there is no chance I'm drafting him in the second round in any league or any format. I need to see him actually make it through 3 entire weeks. He's done that. Maybe we see him make it through like 7 weeks. Lofty goals, I suppose. LaMelo had one season where he stayed healthy. We're waiting on that bad boy to come around again. Please come around again. And then we can go back to drafting him. But until that time, don't. Just let it go. It's okay. You're not going to miss out on that much. I promise your team will be fine, even if you don't take a shot on LaMelo Ball, who, like James Harden and Trae Young before him here, and we talk through guys that are good player builds. Obviously, 8-cat. He was number 27 last year. So, this ranking is not that far away from his 8 category number. Punt field goal on top of 8-cat, because he was maybe the worst field goal guy in the NBA. He was number 14. So in that build, he would have been a per game win. But he missed half the season again. Again. Over and over he goes. I will not draft LaMelo Ball until he proves to me that he can make it through a season mostly unscathed and dings up, that kind of thing. So basically, can you get to 69, 70 ball games? What do we think for LaMelo? Can he get there? Probably not, so we're going to avoid it. Jalen Johnson is number 23. I think I'm higher on Jalen Johnson than most, and I'm honestly kind of okay with that. He has pretty obvious shortcomings in his fantasy game that we've got to work out. But he was number 21 in 9 category leagues last year after, amazingly, kind of a slow start to the season. If you look at the last however many games for Jalen Johnson, when his free throws started to go in and his free throws and his turnovers started to come down, he was a reliable early second rounder during that stretch. The big issue for Jalen Johnson was, well, there were two. We just mentioned them. There's the free throw stuff, which seemed like it was improving as we went. And then the turnovers were painfully high at the beginning of the year and started to level off a little bit as the healthy part of his season kind of wound down. I'm okay with him going late in the second round. The health thing is the thing that we're probably all most concerned about because his fantasy stuff is going to be huge. I got people telling me that he's going to lose out because of Kristaps Porzingis, and that might be true, but I'm not even really that concerned about the on-court product. It's all about whether or not he can make it through. I mean, we just set this cutoff for Kevin Durant. Like, Jalen's got to be better than that from a health standpoint, because if KD's number 8, then he can miss 20 ball games. If Jalen Johnson is number 20 something and we want him, the team wants to be able to cheer for him. What does that even mean? I'm losing my mind here. I feel like I'm like in a daze for this episode. What's going on with me right now? Am I suffering a medical event on a podcast? Possibly. Jalen Johnson, if we, the team, who's this team? If we want to be able to cheer for him, we need to make it through the damn year. I'm not worried about the field goal. I'm not worried about the free throw. I'm not worried about all the counting stuff. I'm worried about the games played. Would I take him at the end of the second round? If the rest of these guys are off the board and some of our third round targets are already off the board as well, then yes. If not, we'll go to some of those guys. Speaking of interesting names that moved around a bunch, because Jalen Johnson only went down one slot here, up by a few to number 24, Josh Giddey, one of the other big movers in the early part of the board, along with Kevin Durant. Giddey moves 11 slots from number 35 all the way up to number 24. End of the third round guy now becomes an end of the second round guy. That is a steep price to pay on Josh Giddey, but you can understand why it's happening. Because at the end of last year, over the final 20 games, Josh Giddey was a top 6 fantasy player with no punts. He was a slot higher if you punted turnovers, but who cares? 3.4 turnovers, but he did that on 21, 11, and 9. He went Nikola Jokic style at the end of last year. I mean, seriously, you just pull up the numbers for like the last 20 games. Jokic was 29, 13, and 10. Josh Giddey was 21, 11, and 9. Jokic wins in the scoring department, yeah, but like that's how Giddey got as high as he did. He's trying to emulate the big dude. Both guys had decent field goal percentage and decent free throws. Jokic obviously better at the field goal percent thing. But like Giddey was a legitimate first rounder for 20 some odd games last year. I find it hard to envision that on repeat, especially the 11 rebounds. He's a good rebounder, but 11 is extraordinary. 9 assists plus, that's also fairly extraordinary. But then again, the Bulls, Giddey was great down the stretch. Kobe White was great down the stretch. Basically, everybody that they threw in there was putting up big numbers down the stretch. So how far do we think Giddey drops from that production? I would think a little longer. I was fairly comfortable with Giddey going in the third. I'm not that comfortable with him going in the second round. This just feels way expensive. But again, at the same time, would you rather have Josh Giddey or Jaylen Brown? Josh Giddey for me. I don't care that Jaylen Brown's going to score more. He's going to be worse probably at both percentages than Giddey. He's going to be more banged up, most likely, than Josh Giddey, because Jaylen Brown always takes his 15 games off on a team in Boston that is probably not going to be pushing their guys all that hard. So Jaylen Brown, who's number 25, and we'll just extend this to 25 because it's a nice round number, even though it is technically the first pick of the third round. I don't like that either. That's fortunate because there are like 2 or 3 guys at the front end of the third round that we'll talk about on an upcoming show that I would prefer to have over a number of these dudes. We'll scroll up just so everybody can see them. Guys like Evan Mobley, Steph Curry, Donovan Mitchell, maybe even Chet Holmgren. That third round quartet. Amen Thompson now is set to be very important. Already was, but no Freddie VanVleet. So that is an upgrade there. You guys know me, I'm not a massive Jalen Brunson fan. But when you're looking at, like, you've got the shot on Giddey, or is Steph still on the board? Difficult decisions. Maybe we need to redo our ADP shows, our ADP battles for the first and second rounds, now that they are looking a little different. You're going to have slightly different things to consider with those picks. All right, I hope we did enough here on this show to get you to click that like or subscribe button. That is obviously the most important thing that you can do while taking in Old Man Squad fantasy basketball content. This show is brought to you by FanDuel Sports and our friends over at Fantrax.com. Fantrax.com/oldmansquad is your sign-up link. That's how they'll know who sent you. It's totally free. You don't have to pay anything to sign up over there. And it's the best place to go for commissioner tools for all your fantasy needs, not just basketball. They got baseball, they got football, they got hockey, they got everything you could need, and great customizable leagues at Fantrax. I have now started my 9-category draft, the Slow Mock, the Dan Besbris annual Slow Mac with 13 other teams, including myself. We're doing a 14-teamer just so I could get more analysts involved, and we'll talk to each of them about their teams when the 14-team mock over at Fantrax is done. Again, that link is fantrax.com/oldmansquad. Very easy to remember. Sign up today, and I will be grateful on that front as well. You can find me on Twitter at Dan Besbris. You can find Old Man Squad also on various social medias, networks, and I hope you will, because we're going to be doing a lot of posting over there in the not-too-distant future. Like, rate, subscribe on the way out. I'm Dan for Old Man Squad, and I'll see you guys very, very soon. Lots left to do on the new Yahoo version 3 rankings board. Adios!